So if you become gluten sensitive, can you reverse it? This is a bit of a tricky subject because some people are born with what's referred to as celiac disease. And this is kind of an inherited immune response to gluten, and these people should simply just avoid gluten altogether. But a lot of people develop a gluten allergy. And this is actually because gluten can actually be quite damaging to the gut in some people. And now this isn't for everyone, and some people can eat gluten just fine. But the reason that a lot of people develop a food allergy is actually because undigested proteins will actually get out of the intestinal tract into the bloodstream before they are digested. So our intestinal tract is coated by a layer of cells called the endothelium. And these cells keep food inside of our intestinal tract outside of the bloodstream. And between each of these cells are what are called tight junctions. And this is simply a barrier that doesn't allow food to slip in between the cells. Gluten sensitivity seems to be quite prevalent because there are specific proteins inside of gluten that can actually open up these tight junctions. And as a result, peptides of gluten, or simply just long strains of undigested amino acids, can actually get out of the intestinal tract. But what's important to know is that right under the intestinal tract is the largest concentration of immune cells. And these are cells that will neutralize any pathogens. And outside of the digestive tract, these peptides are thought of as pathogens. And the reason that gluten and other things like lectins seem to be so allergenic is because not only do they open up the tight junctions, but since they're there at the site of damage, they can enter into the bloodstream. So when we mount an immune response to these undigested food particles, we form what's called an IgG antibody. And you can think of it as an immune cell that's very specific to the proteins in gluten. And it's said that they have a half-life of around 3 weeks. So I can't really tell you whether or not you will actually be able to eat gluten once again. But one thing you could do is take a period of time where you're not eating gluten, and then take steps to repair your gastrointestinal tract. Interestingly, one of the very helpful amino acids seems to be L-glutamine. And no one really wants to hear this, but unfortunately stress, which leads to the production of cortisol, can actually increase the permeability of these tight junctions. And while I admit that this statement is simply my hypothesis, it seems to be in order to get more nutrients into the bloodstream in times of stress. But this also allows for more undigested nutrients into the bloodstream. Finally, we'd want to avoid other things that may increase the permeability or the gap between these tight junctions. And the highest concentration of these are going to be in raw foods, specifically nuts, grains, legumes, and vegetables. This doesn't mean you have to avoid them altogether, but I'd recommend cooking them extremely well when you eat them. And for a period of time, maybe avoiding things like beans, nuts, and seeds, and consuming easier to digest vegetables like carrots, cucumbers, and well-cooked potatoes. My best recommendation is to maybe give it 2 months. And after 2 months, don't go out and eat an entire pizza. Instead, start off with a small amount of food coming from gluten. And simply just monitor how this affects your digestion and your overall feelings of well-being. And now this doesn't just apply to gluten, it really applies to all food sensitivities. As unfortunate as it sounds, it seems like the foods that we eat the most often are the ones we're most likely to get an allergic response to, simply because they have more opportunity to be exposed to these open tight junctions and get into the bloodstream a little bit undigested. With that being said, I hope this helped, and if you have any other questions, please let me know.